Hey everyone, you guys made it just in the nick of crime. It is Wednesday, May 17th, what I am calling day 7 of the Diddy trial, because we did have jury picking and all that kind of stuff last week, but it is technically the second day of testimony and the actual trial going on. This is our midday update. Now, next week, I will not be able to do the midday updates as I'm going to be out of town, but I do have somebody who's going to help me pull notes, send them to me twice a day, and we will be doing recaps at the end of the day, and I will be doing videos of anything that's really pertinent that's coming out. So, of course, you're going to want to make sure to follow along there. Now, all of that being said, if you are watching this on TikTok specifically, again, please, if you just got in here, tap that screen. Let's get that to over 10,000 likes. If it's not there already, we already got there. Let's go for 25,000. And on top of that, you guys can stay right where you are. We may have a guest on in a little bit. I've invited Secret Service Samson, who was at the Diddy trial over the last couple of days. He's now back in LA to see if he would come on. He did say yes, but then I haven't heard from him. So if he comes on, great. You guys would have to hear him to jump. You'd have to jump over to YouTube or Instagram. If you are watching on TikTok, or sorry, on YouTube or Instagram, you don't have to go anywhere. You can stay right where you are. Nevertheless, whichever platform you are watching, make sure to hit that follow button. Now, we're talking about the midday updates here. Oh, yeah, let me do this real quick. Sorry. Yeah, two things. Substack. This is the only thing I'm going to promote today. Substack and YouTube. Follow me there, because if you're on TikTok or you're on Instagram and you miss these updates, you want to see them, you can always find them on either two of these, because before I go live, like today, I sent a Substack article out with basically my notes that I've taken through the day and some of the big highlights of what you need to know. And then we go over them here on YouTube, and they are always here. They are always recorded. So if those are things that you guys want, make sure to follow on both of those platforms. Now, let's just get right into it, okay? Let's just get right into it. Let me get my notes pulled up here. You guys know how I do this. I take a lot of notes in the morning. I order them, and then I put them. Then we go through, and we're just going to read them, because that is easier for me than trying to memorize all this stuff, because there's so much coming out from Cassie. There is so much. Like when we talked about yesterday and we saw how much was at midday, and then we talked about the end of the day and we saw how much that was, it is absolutely insane the amount of things that she is talking about. That being said, let's talk about how the defense might approach cross-examination when they get to that point. Let's start there. This is obviously an op-ed. This was written by an analyst, legal analyst. And so we're going to talk about kind of what that means. And then we're going to kind of get into how court has gone today. So obviously Cassie has now taken the witness stand for the second day after spending over 4.5 hours yesterday testifying as the prosecution's star witness. Now, her emotional testimony is focused on the power dynamics, the S performances known as Freakoffs, and the physical abuse that she endured through her decade-long relationship with Sean Diddy Combs. Now, the defense is likely to remind the jury that this case is not a domestic violence case. He emphasizes that this is a federal case involving federal crimes. Combs has pled guilty to 5 counts, which include racketeering, conspiracy, transportation to engage in prostitution, and trafficking by force or coercion. As for how the defense might approach cross-examining for Cassie, basically they're highlighting that the relevance of Ventura's pregnancy suggests that could possibly influence the jury's sensitivity, but the defense must focus on the core issue. The defense will try to emphasize the fact that Combs and Ventura were in a long-term relationship, questioning why Ventura didn't leave or say no during these events despite having the opportunity to do so. It was also stressed that this issue is really not about the person's life on trial. Jurors are not there to be the morality police. The issue is it a federal offense? Where is the fraud? Where is the coercion? In the end, while sensitivities in the cross-examination are expected, the defense attorneys will stay focused on the criminality at the heart of this case. Now, before we get into the things, let's talk about that real quick, because right now the biggest things that we have seen is issues to prostitution and coercion. What does that at this point show? Racketeering, conspiracy, trafficking, or fully the travel to engage in prostitution? Not necessarily yet. I think if anything, you're kind of on the precipice of the last one. But not yet. But at the same time, again, this is day 2 of what's going to be an 8-week trial. All right. And I also want to bear in mind before we get into this, as Cassie is doing this, she is 8 months pregnant. She is due in a couple weeks, and she is out here sharing this story, her truth, and in very embarrassing things that she had to endure at the hands of him for the entire world to hear. I say it every time I'm on here, she is a rock star. Her bravery is boundless, and she deserves a moment of appreciation for that. So let's talk about who's there, what people are wearing, that kind of stuff, and then we're going to get into testimony. So Cassie took the stand today. She was wearing a dark gray jacket and gray turtleneck sweater. When she entered the courtrooms, Diddy did not react. Cassie appeared calm as she removed her jacket before sitting down. Prosecution will continue questioning her this morning, which they did, after which the defense will have their turn to cross-examine her. So cross could start as soon as today, but maybe not. The courtroom resumed with Sean Combs, Cassie Ventura, and the jury all present. Combs entered the room dressed in a gray sweater over a white shirt. We talked about with Cassie. Cassie's light gray dress had a jacket featuring wide lapels. She did not look at Combs or the defense table when she walked in. In addition to Sean Combs and Cassie Ventura, some of Combs' adult sons were in court today, though his daughters were not present. And that's what we got. He was wearing thick black rim glasses as well, as exhibits were shown. And he was seen standing and hunched over a laptop with two of his lawyers, while his other attorneys discussed the logistics for playing Freakoff videos with the prosecutors and judge at the bench. The last thing I want to talk about that we didn't get a chance to talk about yesterday is a woman by the name of Carrie Morgan. She was brought up during Cassie's testimony. She was once Cassie's best friend, and they were close when Cassie started dating Sean Combs in 2007. However, their friendship became strained after an assault in 2018, which Cassie claimed was caused by Diddy. So this is basically another layer of where he impacted her life. According to Cassie's lawsuit, the fallout from the assault led to a settlement between Diddy and Morgan. Cassie also ended up paying Morgan additional funds in an attempt to resolve the dispute between her close friend and her abusive boyfriend. As a result, Cassie's relationship with Morgan was never the same after that. So I wanted to talk about that too, because we didn't get to talk about that yesterday. So now questioning, it was basically going to start with the 2016. They ended yesterday on the 2016 hotel surveillance cameras. And that's kind of where they pick up with this. Okay. To kind of a little bit of a recap on that. She broke down in tears, showing the emotional toll that it took on her, trying to keep Diddy happy, avoiding his temper. Sorry, this thing's behind me. She detailed how Combs' constant demand for freak-offs and substance-fueled encounters left her feeling worthless. She said, quote, "I didn't want him to be upset or not trust me. He was a scary person. He would be violent." Before she retook the stand, her lawyer expressed optimism, saying they were nearing the end of this trial. Speaking under an umbrella outside, they likened the trial to a triathlon. She said, "You're a bit anxious. You get in the water. It's cold. When you start to feel comfortable, you get on a bike, start moving fast." Basically, that this is going in the direction that they want is kind of what they're saying. So let's just jump into it now. Okay. Again, please continue to tap that screen. I appreciate you guys on TikTok. Make sure to hit that follow button if you can. If you're coming in late, you can jump over to YouTube and it's all there, or follow on Substack where I've already kind of outlined this. So now when she took the stand, she remained calm and poised. She continued her details involving the freak-offs, which were done at the request of Sean Diddy Combs. She had to review briefly review a binder of photos that were provided by prosecutors. And in that binder, she identified 13 male S workers, which she said she recruited for these events in Las Vegas, Miami, and LA. She testified that she had relations with all of them. Sorry, guys, we got to keep it social media safe. Though she couldn't recall all their names, noting some she only knew by their first names. Some of the escorts were flown in specifically for these occasions. On Tuesday, Cassie had previously identified half a dozen other escorts, including one who was advertised as the Punisher, quote unquote. She continued describing the freak-offs today. Cassie revealed that she tried to avoid kissing the escorts because it felt too intimate and made her squeamish, but Sean would request to see it, so she would do it. She explained that she would comply with his demands, even though it was uncomfortable for her. Going back to the assault, she resumed her testimony, talking about what happened at that hotel in 2016, the one that we saw on surveillance cameras. Bearing in mind, guys, that yesterday what jurors saw was different angles and different video than what we have seen, things that have not yet been released. Cassie describes how Combs lost control in a hotel hallway, throwing a vase that narrowly missed her. She said, quote, "I don't remember exactly his words. I'm sure he was calling me something other than my name." She explained that after the incident, she called security, but Combs allegedly told her that I wasn't going to leave him, that I couldn't. Cassie also testified about the aftermath of the assault, stating that later that evening, Combs came to her apartment where she heard chaos outside her door, including banging, kicking, and yelling, which she described as pretty normal behavior for him. An unnamed friend of Cassie's called the police when she saw the injuries, but Cassie did not explicitly name Combs as the person who assaulted her. And when asked by the prosecution, Emily Johnson, if she was trying to protect him, Cassie said, yes, of course. Which, again, when we talk about abusers, that's something that's pretty common because oftentimes the people who are being abused are afraid to turn their abusers in because of the retaliation. And when you have somebody who has the money and power that Sean Diddy Combs has, she's rightfully afraid. And, we talk about these types of things when we have people like Joe Petito and Nikki and Jim Schmidt, Gabby Petito's parents on, where they're trying to change the way that domestic violence is handled so that victims are safe. This is kind of the thing that we're talking about. They aren't safe. They don't feel safe to do this. And oftentimes, you guys have seen these stories before. Most of my following is women, okay? Between all platforms, I have over 2 million followers, like probably 2.1. Most of my following is women. And every time I say, how many of you guys have been a victim of some type of domestic violence or domestic assault, the number is staggering. In fact, I'm sure now that I said that on Instagram and on TikTok, especially because I have, the larger presence in those rooms, a lot of people are going to be saying, me, I was. And that's the case. And how many of these times do we hear these stories where people don't make it out alive? YouTube as well, right? Because eventually it leads to that. It gets worse and worse and worse. And so always these women who are part or victims of these people are trying to protect their assailants because they're worried about the aftermath, especially when the court systems give them a slap on the wrist. And that is if they are normal, regular, everyday people, not a hundreds of millions millionaire / billionaire at the height of his career, who has so much pull, so much money, can get out of anything. He would have less than a slap of a wrist and she would have paid for it. And that is my personal opinion on that. Okay. Now, after police left, Combs allegedly continued to cause a scene outside her door. Cassie explained how, despite her emotional and physical state, she later received several messages from him asking her to call him, claiming the police were there and that he was being arrested. One of the texts read, "Call me, the cops are here and you're going to abandon me all alone." Cassie responded, "I have a black eye and a fat lip. You are sick for thinking it's okay to do what you've done. Please stay far away from me." The jury also heard a series of text messages exchanged between Combs and Cassie after that altercation. The texts were, "Call me. Yo, please call me. I got 6 kids. Please call me. Yo, please call. I'm surrounded. Call me for my kids. Help." All of that, guys, is manipulation. Like, I know I normally just go straight off the script, but I get a little fired up with this type of stuff because it is manipulation and it is abuse and it is isolation. It is everything wrong with somebody like this, to keep her down, to keep her thinking that the only way she is safe is with him, despite the fact he is the one that she needs to be kept safe from. Right? It's huge. And this is why I sit here and say how much I commend Cassie for going up on the stand, 8 months pregnant, getting ready to, to have a baby in 2 weeks, the stress and toll that this is taking on her emotionally, not to mention all the raging hormones that she must have in the 3rd trimester, having to deal with all of this and share her story with everybody in the world, listening to some of the most intimate, embarrassing, humiliating details of her life, none of which were her fault. And that's what I'm going to say to that. Cassie finally testified that she responded eventually with, "Put the robe on," explaining that Combs was running around in a towel and she was just trying to help. When he continued to text asking her to call, Cassie said she responded again, telling him that she had spoken to security and that the escort had left. And she said, quote, "As long as you don't disturb the guests, they'll leave you be." Cassie also shared the emotional and physical toll the assault took on her. Despite the bruises on her face and body, she attended the premiere of her movie, The Perfect Match, shortly after the assault. She applied heavy makeup over her black eye and her fat lip and had to change her outfit to cover the bruises on her legs. Cassie said, "Combs was sick to think that it was okay to do that to me." Right? Now, let's talk about Suge Knight, because if you remember, Suge Knight came up again in Cassie's testimony. Personally speaking, I find the addition of Suge Knight into this very interesting because I'm low-key obsessed, not even low-key, I'm high-key obsessed with like the East Coast, West Coast war, the whole Bad Boy Records versus Death Row, Tupac versus Biggie kind of thing, and the rivalry that they had between the two of them. And so this kind of, I think, underscores how significant this rivalry was, because the Freakoffs were one of the most important things to him. And if you remember what we talked about yesterday, if you saw the things yesterday, when he found out, when a bodyguard came in and told him that Suge Knight had been located nearby, like he was in the vicinity, Diddy, dressed in all black, grabbed firearms, and they left in an SUV with Cassie screaming, "Please don't do anything stupid." Suge Knight, y'all, is a dangerous man. And I would argue more dangerous than Diddy could ever hope to be. Where Diddy is a wannabe thug, Suge is a real thug. He is a real gangster. He had real associations with, I believe he was associated with the Bloods. Oh, yeah, positive. It was the Bloods. Okay. So basically, they began questioning her again about this incident involving Diddy and his rival, Suge Knight. She talked about, again, how they left for him to go find him at Mel's Drive-In, which, by the way, is a landmark diner that was nearby. She said, quote, "R-Rock came in and said Suge was down at the diner. Sean drove over there. I cried. I said, don't do anything stupid. It was like I was never even there. They put on a bunch of black clothes, went in the safe, grabbed firearms. Next thing I knew, they were in the SUV just whipping down there. I saw them get dressed and leave the house." This was mid Freakoff. Mid Freakoff. He left. One of the most important things to him. Absolutely insane. Like, that's how big his thing is. Cassie then began to testify about threats and panic over her explicit video. So let's talk about that. So she testified that Sean Diddy Combs repeatedly threatened to release recordings of their freak-offs, which she feared would ruin everything she had worked for. She said, quote, "It could make me look like a slut." Explaining that she always worried Combs would get angry enough to release the footage. She said, quote, "I feared for my career. I feared for my family. It's just embarrassing. It's horrible and disgusting. No one should do that to anyone." In March of 2014, she recalled being told at an event in Atlantic City that someone had seen an explicit video of her. Immediately, her thoughts went to a freak-off. The jury was shown a text message thread between Cassie and Combs in which Combs instructed her to find out more about the video and where it had come from. Quote, "You got to tell him this is your life. This is serious." That's what Combs wrote. So it sounds like he might not have been the one that leaked it. Or maybe he was, because it was fun for him. Who knows? The next day, she met with the man and a DJ who showed him the video at a restaurant in New York. At Combs' direction, she brought security with her to intimidate the men. Her manager, James Cruz, also attended the dinner. Cassie described the panic she felt upon first learning that the video of her having relations with another man at Combs' direction might have leaked. She recalled hosting an event in Atlantic City when someone she was working with said, "Hey, they saw an explicit video of me," so she reached out to Sean. Going back to some of those messages, she said, "I need you to call me ASAP." This was on March 9th, 2014. She explained that the potential leak of the footage would put my career in jeopardy and cause great embarrassment to her family. Then it goes from there into substance usage during the freak-offs, okay? So she testified about her role of ketamine in the freak-off she participated in at Diddy's request, just a reminder. The jury saw the text message exchanges between Cassie and Combs where he asked her to take ketamine for the next freak-off. Cassie explained that ketamine was her preferred substance for these encounters because it allowed her to disassociate. In one text, Combs wrote, "You know, we have to have a proper FO without no K." The freak-off without no K. A successful FO is when, here's what he said, sorry. "You know, we have to have a proper FO without no K." The FO without no K is all caps. "A successful FO is when we remember." Cassie replied, "That is all we do, and I'm just getting back on track. I'm sure you can call Kim or something." In January of 2016, Combs sent Cassie a text message expressing a desire to have a proper FO without the ketamine. Cassie explained that she preferred using it during the freak-off because it was the most disassociative, helping her mentally detach from the encounters because she didn't want to be part of these encounters. She didn't want to be part of them, and it was the only way. He was making her do it. She didn't want to be sleeping with strange men, particularly escorts. Who wants to do that? And for 3 to 4 hours, sometimes, the longest one went 4 straight days. Right? Anyways, so not only did she prefer ketamine, it was also Combs' choice when there were escorts or S-workers involved. She said, ketamine, Sean had it. It took time out of the freak-off, she said. Describing the encounters where Combs would direct her to have relations with other men. The prosecution showed the jury about a dozen photos of workers that were hired Talked about this a little bit earlier, but a little bit more detail here on this. She recognized many of the individuals, but couldn't recall all their names. She identified some by name, such as Ash, Islander, Skylar, and Jake. Those all came from the website Cowboys for Angels. One picture said, she said she doesn't remember his name. He looks familiar from Freakoffs. All right. Then talked about how she felt empty after these Freakoffs. She said, quote, empty. I definitely just felt gross. She said she felt worse when she didn't stay with him after. She said that she felt like, okay, I did my job. Now I'm going to go about the rest of my life, the same feelings over and over. That's how she got to it. She took substances to disassociate and looked at it as a job. And if you remember what she testified yesterday, what was supposed to be a 10-album contract where only one album was released, despite hundreds of songs being recorded, her full-time job became arranging the Freakoffs, participating in the Freakoffs, then recovering from the Freakoffs to do it all again the next week. That was her life. That was her job. It's a constant rotating slew of workers and individuals that Diddy wanted her to do this with. She talked about some of the health issues she faced, because obviously you can't go through doing what you can't go through, the gratuitous S encounters with S workers taking substances, and you not have health issues that come from that, right? So she talked about the Freakoffs and about recovering. She talked about how she would take IV fluids and get massages and often take opiates. She said, quote, opiates made me feel numb, which is why I relied on them so heavily. She also described having regular gastrointestinal issues from the substances that she took, as well as frequent UTIs from the Freakoffs. She said the UTIs were so frequent that she would often have one during the Freakoffs, and typical medications stopped working because she became resilient to the medications. That's how often they happened. She testified about the physical and emotional toll that she participated in. She said afterwards she would return to Combs's place, where they would try to recover with, again, those massages, meals prepared by a chef. However, she explained that the recovery process wasn't just physical. She said she felt so tired, achy, dehydrated, not really eating too much. Emotionally, I felt empty, gross, like I did a job. That's what she testified. Those were her words. And again, because of all this, because she started taking opiates, she develops an opioid addiction. And as she said, opioids made her feel numb. That's why she relied on them. She explained that they helped her escape the aftermath of the Freakoffs, allowing her to detach from the experience. She said, quote, I wanted to feel numb and not know what was going on in my mind, because she couldn't escape her own self and what she was putting herself through, and the degradation that caused, and the emptiness that it caused. She also developed mouth sores from repeated oral with lubricant. She said, quote, it was really painful for a long time. I can't believe I actually dealt with that. She further testified that it would take her days to recover from the marathon Freakoffs, in addition to IVs and the opioids. They talked about the meals. They talked about the massages. She said, I didn't want to feel what was actually going on in my mind, in my life, in real time. It was just an escape for me. Then we talk about afterwards. Cassie Ventura testified that Sean Diddy Combs would sometimes convince her to go to S clubs or swinger clubs in Las Vegas and Los Angeles. On at least one occasion, she said one of the escorts participating in the Freakoffs brought his girlfriend, and she had S with the escort at the club. Ventura explained that she told Combs she felt uncomfortable going to these clubs. Quote, I'm not into seeing the person you're in love with somebody else. Despite her discomfort, Cassie and Combs continued to push her. Cassie said Combs continued to push her, insisting that it would be a fun thing to do and we wouldn't go for long. She also described how, when she didn't want to participate, Combs would often try to turn the situation around and become playful in convincing her that it wouldn't be a big deal. She then further testified that when they went to these clubs, she would sometimes have S with Combs or with an escort, even though she didn't want to. She said, quote, he'd usually just like push, keep pushing, or just try to convince me that it'd be a fun thing to do. And she said to cope with that situation, she would often drink or do substances before they left. She also tried to introduce a lifestyle, quote unquote, of multiple partners, which he described as a turn on for him. Quote, what he told me is we could swap partners, a certain lifestyle, that it was a turn on for him. She explained that this lifestyle included the visits to these S clubs, which again, she did not enjoy. And again, despite her reluctance, he continued to press the issue. Now, she also testifies to injuries from the Freakoffs. On several occasions, she says that she was injured when Diddy would put his hands on her. She described the assaults as happening too frequently and mentioned that there were times when Combs would assault her while an escort was still in the hotel room. In 2013, she recounted an altercation while she was packing to attend Drake's music festival in Canada. Combs became violent, scuffling with her friends and throwing her into a bed frame. As a result, she suffered a pretty significant gash above her left eye. Said Combs' security personnel took her to a plastic surgeon in Beverly Hills to have the wound stitched up. Which, by the way, fun fact, if you ever do get a wound on your face, you want a plastic surgeon to do it, not somebody else. You wait for the plastic surgeon. They're going to make sure that you have a minimal, if no scar at all. Just a fun fact. Don't let anybody other than the plastic surgeon stitch it up for you. Just keep that in the back of your mind. Afterwards, Cassie sent Combs a photo of her injured face with the caption, "So you can remember." And Diddy responded, "You don't know when to stop. You pushed it too far and continue to push. Sad." Victim blaming, guys. Victim blaming. Ventura also detailed how during the Freakoff, she would sometimes feel afraid, especially when the encounters turned violent. Sean would put his hands on me. He would push me down, kick me. When asked by prosecutors how often this would happen how often Combs would injure her during these encounters, she replied, "Too often." If the situation became too intense or if she felt scared or uncomfortable, Cassie would typically leave and exit through the back of the hotel. In addition to the physical violence, Cassie described how the videos from the Freakoffs were used as blackmail materials. Combs allegedly threatened to release these explicit videos when he was angry with her. She said, quote, "I feared for my career and I feared for my family. It's horrible. It's disgusting. No one should do that to anyone." That's what Ventura testified. She further explained that in 2013, she texted Combs to delete the videos off his phone, and he claims that he had. However, Ventura testified that she saw the videos again over the years, indicating that they still existed. Ventura also recounted a nonviolent altercation in 2013. A violent altercation in 2013 in August. After a night out with friends, she was sleeping in her apartment when Combs woke her up with a commotion, yelling about her not packing for an upcoming trip. Dead asleep, just comes in hot. Two of her friends tried to intervene by jumping on Combs' back as he was attempting to attack her. The altercation moved from the living room into the master bedroom where Combs threw her down, causing her to injure her eyebrow on the corner of the bed. That's the situation where she suffered that pretty significant gash. Later that day, Combs sent her, she sent the image, hold on. She said that she didn't want him to forget about what he did. At the very least, she wanted him to feel sorry about it. The jury saw that photo of Ventura in French, Montana at a festival shortly after the incident. She testified that she styled her hair over her wound to conceal it. Pointing to her eyebrow on the witness stand, Ventura confirmed that she still has a permanent scar from the injury. She just covers it up with makeup. Then she talks about more of him threatening, not only threatening to release the videos, but showing the Freakoff videos. She testified about a traumatic incident where during a trip to the Cannes Film Festival with Sean Combs, where tensions between the two escalated, Ventura recalled that Combs accused her of stealing his substances from him, leading to an argument that ended with him kicking her off his friend's boat early one morning. She said she walked to his staff's hotel and stayed in someone's room. So they were in another country. She was on a boat for this film festival. They got into an argument. She kicks him off. He kicks her off the boat, keeping her ID, keeping her passport, by the way, which we're going to talk about, I think, in a second. I think that's in the notes, and makes her leave without even a hotel room, with no way of even getting one. She had to sleep on somebody else's. At the festival, Ventura describes Combs as giving her evil glares, and he physically squeezed her thighs tightly while she was wearing a beaded dress, causing her pain. On the flight back home, she avoided sitting next to him by switching seats, but Combs traded places with another passenger in order to sit beside her. During the flight, he played videos of the Freakoffs that Ventura had thought had been deleted. By the way, this was a commercial flight, not a private jet. So he plays these on this commercial flight where anybody could possibly see them. It's a mind fuck, is what it is. Right? To keep her on her toes, to keep her listening. Physical violence, violence, verbal abuse, emotional abuse. Every gauntlet of abuse this monster put her through. I'm going to save that thought for a second. Ventura testified that Combs threatened to release these videos, saying that he was going to embarrass me and release them. After landing in New York, she said they went to dinner. Combs demanded another Freakoff, and she said whatever was going to make him not be angry at me and threatening me, I was willing to do. I just didn't want to feel scared anymore. And it was the one thing that made me feel like I was good at, he made me feel like I was good at. She was good at the Freakoffs. Ventura further testified that Combs frequently threatened to release them if she didn't behave according to his demands. That was a big part of her relationship. And those, my friends, are the midday notes. Let me explain something to y'all real quick. Okay. I'm going to come back to the thought I started with. I don't know if at the end of the day we have reached anything that falls into the 5 charges at this point in time that the feds have against him. This is not a domestic violence case. Okay. So domestic violence is not going to be what he's charged with here. But here's what I want to say. Regardless of whether or not he's convicted of the charges they have on him, which I think he will be, he is a monster. The domestic violence, the abuse, everything that he did to this woman was beyond horrific, beyond unimaginable.